All right, welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. You got Logan Jones, joined today by Evan Knowles. And today we are talking with Monica Bilak, who is the Executive Director of Sprocket Innovation, which is the Kentucky Innovation Hub based in Paducah, Kentucky. Just to remind listeners what we mean when we say a Kentucky Innovation Hub, Kentucky Innovation is one of our sponsors, which is part of our state's Cabinet for Economic Development, and they support entrepreneurship throughout the state through these different hub organizations. So you've likely heard about some of these hubs on our podcast before, the others being Awesome Inc., SOAR, Amplify, Blue North, Create, and Sprocket. So this is the first conversation we're getting to have with Monica. We're super excited to talk to her, hear her story, and hear about the mission of Sprocket in Western Kentucky. Before we dive into this conversation, we just want to get a quick word from our sponsors. Before highlighting our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. Middle Tech is also supported by Huntsicker, an impact venture studio based in Lexington, Kentucky. Huntsicker is creating companies out of the ordinary by founding and funding the next generation of purpose-driven startups. They partner with founders to create indispensable solutions to the world's most fundamental problems. On a quarterly basis, they host an invite-only intimate gathering called Fireside Convos, where attendees representing a wide network of stakeholders in the regional entrepreneurial ecosystem discuss timely topics, including the role of AI for startups out of Kentucky and the challenges of identifying and attracting talent. To be considered as a guest, visit huntsicker.co/fireside to apply. Middle Tech is sponsored by Bolt Marketing. Take your website to the next level with a website that's built to work. At Bolt Marketing, they're revolutionizing websites for small businesses that are affordable, customizable, and hassle-free. Whether you have a construction company, a boutique clothing store, or you own a hot yoga studio, they have options for you. Click the link in our show notes to explore their marketing options that can transform your marketing and grow your business. And as a personal note, Bolt Marketing built our website, and they were awesome to work with throughout the entire process. We highly recommend working with. All right, Monica, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you join us. How are you doing this evening?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Awesome. Well, just to kick things off here, we'd love to just get a quick background on you. So tell us some of your career highlights and how you ended up leading Sprocket.
Oh, yeah. Well, career highlights, they're all over the place. I started running microgrants when I lived in East Africa. So I used to work with women crafters and helped them start their businesses. Moved back to the U.S. and then ran a couple of small businesses that were more brick and mortar, like coffee houses and gift shops and things like that. And then went to work with the local government and started doing neighborhood revitalization. And that got me in economic development, which pushed me into some other projects with education and workforce. And went back to design school at Parsons, got a strategic design degree, and then just started playing around and building things. So I was working on something called the Paducah Innovation Hub, which was actually when the state of Kentucky started changing up all the area technology centers, which are the vocational schools. We rebuilt and redesigned our vocational experience to be really high tech, because we knew the workforce demanded different skills. And while I was doing that, I was in the same building I'm in right now, but I was in the boiler room because I had free space, and I ran workshops for kids, prototyping tech courses. And then the state came around to see what we were doing, because we were playing with this idea of building out this other space next to the boiler room, which was about 9,000 square feet. And they were like, take it up a notch and start working with adults. And so we did, and that kind of bore out the new Sprocket Entrepreneur Center here in Paducah.
Very cool. So it started with younger
I did also
students,
work,
and then kind of, it sounds like it Sorry, go ahead. I think the lag caught us there, but we'll edit this part out.
Okay. What was your question?
I was just going to say, so it sounds like Sprocket kind of started with younger students at first, then blossomed into more programs around adults and entrepreneurs that had been at it for a little bit longer. So when was kind of Sprocket as it is today first established? How long have you guys been around now?
Well, so the nonprofit started in 2017. We spent a few years just working on youth programming and tech. And then around 2020, of course, what a great time, we decided to really expand everything. We started writing grants, and we actually started launching all our programs in 2020. We moved into our space in 2021. So it was a lot of fundraising and different things going on with that as well. So yeah, we've been spending a few years on it, but we're still very new and very early in this game.
Getting to do work in Africa, as you mentioned, really interesting background there as part of your journey. What were some of the takeaways that maybe you've used here in the States?
So I'll tell you, my biggest takeaway is sometimes all you need is a little leverage. You really need to, you need a little bit of something to help you really understand your market. So the role I would play with the women that I worked with was really helping them tap into a viable market. And that was basically me at the time, and anyone that was, there was a lot of expatriates living in a large community. We did healthcare, we did education, and I was trying to help them tap into our market. Like, hey, how do you sell to all these people who aren't from your country, but they're here and they're wanting goods and they're wanting clothing and they're wanting, what kind of product? So I'd help them with product development, product design, and then I would just help them with really small investments that really meant a lot to them. And it was practically nothing for me to make that investment, but it would change the entire outlook. So I think I really saw when you can really get to what is needed so that company can develop some traction, it doesn't necessarily have to be a lot. It just has to be the right thing. And so we would work that way. So I think that was my biggest takeaway, is that it doesn't always have to be a ton of money that has to come in. It just has to be the right kind of work and really knowing how to find that right market.
And back to Sprocket, and with some of those learnings that you got from your time in Africa, tell us about some of the programs that you guys have within Sprocket. So when we got on our initial call, we talked about the Built Mentor Network, a jobs board that you guys are trying to spin up. Obviously we're familiar with that first 50K because we've interviewed Stevens Bonham on the podcast. So just give us kind of an overview on, how you guys are actually supporting entrepreneurs on the ground in Western Kentucky.
Yeah, so it's kind of a layered approach. We have just free networking every Wednesday. We have coffee. So you don't have to be a member of our space, a co-work member. You can just come in, make some connections, meet some people. And so we open up the space on Wednesday mornings for that. And then that just becomes a kind of a cool learning, really, non-threatening place to just kind of go sit down and hang out with some people and learn something if we have a speaker or whatever. And then we have like lunch and learns, like I'll have a monthly lunch and learn, and we'll bring in somebody maybe from the cabinet to come and talk about incentives and, different opportunities, or we'll have someone from Keyhorse just share like, hey, here's how you approach me when you have something and you're looking for an investment. Or we'll have those lighter speakers, but they're meaty, but it's kind of the lunchtime, once a month, kind of more educational. And then we run two programs. One is called the West Kentucky Innovation Challenge. We just had our first live pitch competition here last week for that. And that was more bring your idea. So we're starting with idea stage usually, and then let us help you see if it's viable, feasible, desirable. And if you can start building that out. And so it's a 6-week program. We integrated it with a mentor network. So they have all these people they can also use in addition to the coursework. And they have a time where they all come. It's almost like a study hall. Just come in and work together on your idea and see where it goes. So we do that twice a year. And then we have another program that's called Next 50K, which is what Stevens was part of. And we put out a national, actually, it's an international call. We'll put it out. We've had a company from India come here as well. So we'll recruit people to Paducah, and they have to live here for 1 year. Somebody on their team has to help start, build, and grow their company. And we give them $50,000 in non-dilutive funds. And then usually there's follow-on funding from venture investors. But they stay here. We get them really super connected. And like Stevens, they'll go on to be part of Vote Award, Render. They'll make their way because our network in Kentucky is so tight and we all know each other. So I feel like our network is faster. Stevens has always said, he met more connections in Kentucky than he did in Seattle. And I think that's just a testament to our connectivity here and our ability to move really quickly with one another because we all pretty much know one another. So I think, that's been a really cool program. We've brought 9 companies total to the community through that program.
Yeah. And, I think one of the goals of the hub ecosystem that Kentucky Innovation has set up is just kind of like having a front door for entrepreneurs to be able to come and interact with the community. Because when you're just starting off in entrepreneurship or starting off and trying to start a small business, it can seem just so intangible of like, where do I go? What do I do? So just having that type of programming that brings people together and allows people to share learnings and interact with other people that are doing it is so important. And then I love what you're saying about interacting with the other ecosystems, because when you think of Kentucky as a whole, our startup ecosystem, our startup community might not be as developed as something like in Indianapolis or Nashville, but we make up for that through the connectivity of it. And, I'm sure we'll get into digging into that a little bit more when we talk about how you guys interact with those other ecosystems. But talk about some of the other notable companies that are being built in Western Kentucky. So I know you mentioned, Feed Coyote, which has been on our podcast with Stevens. But what are some other ones that are worth mentioning, and just like a quick sentence or two about what they do?
Absolutely. So eWagers came in when Feed Coyote was here, and he does online game wagering. And that's Noah Folk. He was one of the top 20 startups to watch 2 years ago. Another company that came actually for our Innovation Challenge was a company called Authify, which is working on pre-authorization for healthcare, helping kind of work through the insurance process when you're just trying to, get your services and the insurance companies denied your claim. How do you get that pre-authorization fixed? So we have another company called Data Rovers. They came in this year with our Next 50K, and they're also working on that, but they're working on it from the providers. So they're a healthcare company as well, but they're working on it from the provider's view on denials and how do you use AI to learn and resubmit your claims that way. And then I've got another cool company called Smart MS3, which has actually a device that you put on your body when you're in physical therapy. And then it actually can measure activation of muscle. And so they've built the entire software platform for that. And they're working with a number of, running pilots, and they have customers now with, in the physical therapy space. So we kind of got an assortment. We got UJoin, Corey Payne, Agility does financial services for state governments. So it's kind of all over the board, really, what we have. But we've been trying to focus in. So last year we created a healthcare advisory board that just serves as a mentor network when we have healthcare companies come into our space or into the region, and then they can actually use that. It's CEOs, but also other healthcare adjacent business owners that can kind of help them build out their network, find those customers, and keep working on their business with a really nice, solid network. So kind of excited about that too.
Yeah, very cool. And it seems like a lot of the hubs take like a corporate development angle as well and partner with larger companies in the region that have, existing well-run businesses to bring either mentors or resources into the hub. Do you have businesses there in Paducah or the surrounding region that you partner with and kind of bring into the Sprocket ecosystem?
Yeah, and so that's something we've been working on. We're not super mature in that yet, but that's one of our big goals. It's interesting you mentioned that, though. Yesterday we had a board meeting, and one of my board members is the VP of software engineering at a company called Computer Services Incorporated, and they do core bank processing, which is a really highly regulated industry. They do this for regional and community banks. And, we're thinking about, okay, what if we built out that fintech network just using your company? Because it's one of the top 10 companies in their space. And in just how would that work if we could make those introductions and bring those companies there, and think about how much faster they could get if they had just some resources that they could call and go, okay, we're kind of thinking this angle. Would this be, here's where we're going to take this, and what are your biggest issues right now, and how can we look at your pain points and really address those with some other products? And I think that those kinds of things have to occur. And so we're kind of working in that way. Healthcare was our first little venture into that. But we think we could also move it into this fintech space, really, something where somebody is developing product for regional and community banks, and how do they do that, and how do they make those connections? That could be an opening for us. We also have, so we're at the confluence of four rivers here in Paducah. So we have some large river barge industry here as well. And so there's a lot of logistics and transportation going on. And so that's another potential opportunity that we could tap in the future once we make our way. It's like, okay, let's see if we can just get this one vertical figured out in healthcare, but how can we then add different sectors where we go, okay, this model worked here. Let's replicate it with another sector in our region and kind of grow those businesses that way. So it's something on our 3-year forecast, but we're still in the building stage. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting when we think about the different ecosystems and how they really try and lean into the different industries that already have kind of taken root within their region.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kentucky's obviously very known for things like, logistics, things like manufacturing, obviously, energy, when you think of coal, and now these new battery plants that are being established throughout the state. So I think it's super interesting that you talk about the barge industry, because I'm sure that's one that just is so under the radar, but is probably a pretty large industry when you start looking into it and moving all sorts of goods throughout the rivers. So very, very interesting one to kind of bring up there.
It is. And it's fun to talk to some people who think that way. We met with CVG 2 weeks ago, and the airport in Cincinnati, and, just playing around with, okay, how would you ship jet fuel? And just being able to have those conversations with people about what if, and it always leads to something. You never know what, right? You don't know what that's going to be. And that may be something that's 10, 15 years down the road, but we started the conversations and we started building those relationships and we started thinking outside of our space a little bit and just collaboratively. And I find that really that's how it all begins, right? There's always something weird there that you can maybe connect to. And and you just don't know what's going to grow from it. So we kind of, have really been trying to do that regionally as well, is like stay connected to everybody, which is why we're building the mentor network and the job board. It's just like, how do we connect ourselves even better as a region than we have before, and get word out to each other. And, people are busy. So it's a real challenge, but I don't know. I basically go around to the other hubs and figure out what they're doing right and try to rip it off mostly.
How do you think about the difference between, small businesses and highly scalable startups that could, take on venture funding? How do you think about that as a hub, and treat, each business? Obviously, they're both entrepreneurs, but, hubs are there for innovation. So we've asked this question to some of the other directors of the hubs, and I'm always curious to hear the answer on that. But how do you all view the difference between, a small business that might be a mom and pop or a brick and mortar, and a highly innovative company, and the resources that you need to provide each?
So, and I think that's why we kind of have the layered approach to entry with us. Sometimes just a coffee hour meeting with other small businesses works for those brick and mortars. And that is who shows up a lot. But we'll invite them to, we host, Aviatra does a Fuel Your Business course, and we host that here in the winter. And we'll do it again. And honestly, sometimes some of the principles of building a business they're just the fact, right? I've got to have a market, right, that wants me. It's got to be desirable. I've got to do the numbers right. Like, I have to have some feasibility here. I've got my costs have to be less than my revenue. And then, it has to be viable. Like, okay, can you really build that? Even if it's a brick and mortar, okay, you want to start the next, I don't know, whatever you would start, books $1 million or something. You can, okay, inventory costs X. So there's some basics that everybody have to get real about, right? And so in some ways, the beginning of that process is the same thinking. Now, what is really different is in scalability, and I still think this is really good for brick and mortars to understand, because everybody is getting disrupted, especially retail. So if I'm doing a mom and pop, I need to think about scalability, because if I don't, right, I'm really at risk. I'm not recognizing threats. I'm not thinking about new entrants into my space, right? So that thinking is still really valuable. Business model design is really valuable even to the little brick and mortar. And sometimes it's good. We've had some businesses come in here and think about, help them rethink what they're already doing. Like, okay, can you scale this to get a bigger market? We had a guy here, and he was basically one of those large machine junkyards. So he was literally the guy who, when you need a part for your giant front loader, he has the junkyard for that. And so he was using spreadsheets and phones, and all the other guys in his space were doing the same thing. So he wanted to build out the platform where they could all have their database and they could each shop each other, because all they were doing was shopping each other, but with a telephone. So in a way, it's like you can still do things, you can still rethink your business for scalability. I mean, everybody needs to grow. Obviously, restaurants are kind of the one where you kind of just have to be there because it's the food, unless, of course, you're having it delivered. But, when you think about it, there's still even that, like, we've got a restaurant here, and she was on Top Chef, the restaurateur that's in our community, and it's called Freight House. And people now travel here, and now she's creating a whole new brand with social media and a whole digital platform. So it's kind of like, I don't know, the world is open for a lot of things these days. So it's not so far-fetched to have a little brick and mortar companies come and learn some skills that might make them a little bit more savvy. But really, when you do look at the scalable and we start looking at venture funders and angels, they're going to want to see a return. And so we do give a lot of attention to them, and we probably, we have a unique mentor set just for those companies that isn't necessarily accessible to, hey, I'm just starting out, I'm working on an idea. Group of people who are entering. So we do kind of keep them a bit like we have different programming for each, if that makes sense. But I think everybody benefits from listening to those fresh, new, innovative ideas. It's really how you're going to keep your business alive, not just grow it.
100%. And I think that's an important topic to discuss as a state, because it's not like one is more valuable than the other. I mean, obviously small businesses can contribute a large amount to our economy, but they're just different, and you support them in different ways, and there's different ways of funding them, and there's different talent needs, and there's different customer acquisition strategies. So I think at least just plainly stating, like, these are two different types of entrepreneurs that require a different set of resources is an important thing to do as we think about how do we allocate our resources as a state to these different markets, because just by nature of, the concentration of talent in some of our larger cities like Lexington and Louisville is going to lead to more of those like innovative startups and more attention from venture capitalists and angel investors. Whereas, ecosystems like Western Kentucky and Southern Kentucky are going to be ones where small business, can spring up, and you want to connect those innovative entrepreneurs to the other hubs and just, have that kind of network effect. So anyway, it's just a topic that Evan and I have been talking about a little bit as we've kind of seen how resources are spread around the state. I just think it's an interesting one that is worth having a conversation around. So we've talked a little bit about some of the industries that are established here. This is more of just like a personal interest question. You talked about logistics and manufacturing and healthcare, proximity to Nashville. One of the other things I think is really interesting, and if you don't know a ton about it, it's okay, but you mentioned on the call that there's some nuclear industry activity in Paducah because they store uranium there. Anything that you're able to talk about with what's going on in the nuclear space down in Paducah?
So it really is interesting. It's fun to listen to. And this is just it. Like, I have nothing. This is where I think, curiosity is great. And entrepreneurs tend to be really curious. But what we have here is an old site where we've got stored uranium enrichment. It's deactivated, right? And so there's new technology now that says, hey, we can take this and we can reactivate this uranium. And so there's a company that is trying to come in and use a laser technology. And I'm not seeing anything private here. So that could be kind of a really interesting idea. There's also nuclear technology has grown to where they're using modular reactors. So, immediately I'm thinking of, oh my gosh, think about, Japan, think about Ukraine, you think about Chernobyl. These terrible disasters. Like, I don't want this anywhere, but it's really changed. And I've gotten to sit and just listen in on some conversations, and it's just fascinating what is happening in that space. You also have to look at the electrical goals, right, for electrical vehicles, but and then you look at the grid in Texas and all the fails for not having enough energy and the energy consumption of us and what we need to do as a country. You kind of look and you think there is no other alternative at this time. If we are going to fulfill these goals in this, of the usage of electric vehicles even. And so it kind of makes you think, and you start to see it, and everybody's moving towards it. So if you look at what some of the granting that's going out of like the Department of Energy and different places, you'll see there, everybody is looking for this next new technologies that are going to take us into a safer, cleaner use of, energy. So I think it's going to happen because I don't think we have a choice. And what, about, our country is that we can always jump to the highest bar and achieve stuff. We have smart people. We do smart things. People are innovative. They're amazingly creative. And so I think that there is a really interesting potential there. And it just so happens that we have a lot of these depleted fuel rods that contain uranium. So somebody should figure out what to do with them. And it's kind of cool because it's like, we're recycling. Yay. It's a big project in that, but I'm not part of it. So I'm not an authority, to speak on it. I've just been kind of listening and watching and seeing what's going on. So we'll see, but that's definitely going to be some big operators, not small necessarily startup, but there is probably something where a startup could build something adjacent, right? Because there's going to be a lot of needs for that. So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. Really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what essentially would hopefully happen is an ecosystem forms where the larger players come in, and then there's incentive for entrepreneurs to build supporting businesses within that ecosystem. And this is actually something I follow pretty closely. I'm pretty fascinated just by energy production in general, but I've been following what's going on in the nuclear space for quite a while. And the state of Kentucky is definitely paying attention to it. There is a bill that has been drafted. It hasn't passed yet, but they're trying to establish the Kentucky Nuclear Energy Development Authority to essentially just prepare the state for the introduction of nuclear energy. And I think it's really interesting because it does have such a negative connotation around it. You think of all the disasters that have happened around nuclear energy, but if you follow some of what's happening in the space and some of the advancements that have been made with these modular reactors, these SMRs, and some of these newer designs, it is leaps and bounds safer. And in some cases, cannot melt down due to the way that they've been built and the laws of physics. So it does excite me that there is like some little blip of that in Kentucky that might be able to take root and build kind of this kind of emerging technology ecosystem. So something to definitely keep an eye on as far as Paducah goes. Evan, I know you had something that you wanted to jump in and add there as well. I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I mean, just continue with the ecosystem theme. When we jumped on a call prior to this, you had briefly talked about partnering with the University of Kentucky, and there's a university system around the state. And again, a lot of the other hubs somehow partner with the local universities or UK, because UK just has such a large reach across the state. How do you all participate in that ecosystem of higher education around Kentucky?
So UK has been great. They're a mile away from us, so it's so easy. So we have the only satellite school of engineering. So we have mechanical, chemical, aerospace, and they are just starting a computer science program as well. So it's fantastic. They have a makerspace. And so we can actually refer, for example, we had Seamly Systems. This was a really cool company, still is, and she does custom fit. So she did, basically you can take your measurements, or you can use a 3D camera, upload them, and then basically create custom fit clothing to your body. And so it's a really, really cool way to think about manufacturing of the apparel industry with almost zero waste. And it's probably the future of, honestly, the garment industry with zero waste, because it's a huge pollutant right now. It's like number 2 or something in just polluting the environment with dyes and different kinds of waste. So she was able to then connect with capstone project there, and the students were building out a 360 camera, and what would that look like, and how could a home model, and basically how do we make this more feasible. And so they were kind of helping her develop what is the technology that needs to come in to really give you traction to make your company work. So they've been great with that. They've helped on a couple of other projects in terms of needing like higher math. We had another company here that was doing testing blood cholesterol, but it's non-invasive. So it was a physician who had worked for the National Institute of Health. And so it was basically, and he's still in production on it, but a non-invasive way to test cholesterol. And so that was great too, because the university has higher math students, and he had a lot of calculation and a lot of math that he was working on, and then a lot of just on the device, what to work on. So it's been really good to have those engineering students, both from Murray State and from the University of Kentucky, play a part. They get really excited too. Their professors get really excited. We all get really excited because there's something real world that the students are helping with, and it really stimulates their thinking about, oh my gosh, where is the world going? Where is industry going with some things? It just makes them smarter. It makes them more creative. It helps them understand what does a company actually need, and how would you provide what they need, and how do you listen to a customer, and how do you listen to those features that they're looking for. It ends up being just an absolute win-win for everybody when we do that. So we've really enjoyed it. We're looking forward to doing a lot more of it. We did just apply for a grant to do more, something in more medical device space, just because of the engineering students that we have here and how many we have. So we'll look and see if that comes true. We'll actually pay the students to do engineering technology for us in their maker spaces. So we'll see what happens with that. Fingers crossed, but you never know.
Super interesting. And I think that comes back to the theme that we kind of hit on at the beginning, just about, an ecosystem like Paducah, like Western Kentucky, that just might be smaller or different than one like Central Kentucky, Louisville, and Lexington. It's interesting to think about the role that universities can play in kind of connecting all of those ecosystems, just kind of one of the fibers that connects us to each other. UK obviously being a great example of that, Murray State, University of Louisville, all those types of universities, especially when it comes to like the young minds that we really want to get into the workforce and like cultivate that talent that, all these companies are always looking for new talent within the state. And I think that's one of the kind of key ways that we connect everyone. Just in your experience, I'm curious, when it comes to interacting with some of these other hubs and some of the other ecosystems and communities around the state, what does that look like for Paducah, for Sprocket? How are you guys connecting people? What does that look like on your end?
It depends on the company. For example, Stevens. Okay, we'll talk about Feed Coyote because he's an easy example, right? He was working with freelancer application, and I was, we're a community of, in just my county, there's only 70,000 people. So, hard to find all the freelancers. It's not, kind of that we have a co-work space here. So young people do kind of gather, and more creative companies, do hang out here, but it wasn't going to be, probably enough. And so that was where, I called Larry Horn, and I'm like, hey, I've got this guy. How can you help me? What do you know? What kind of networks do you guys have that are already in existence that he can tap into? And then I think Larry introduced him to Techstars, made some connections for him there. So then all of a sudden Stevens is now in Techstars, he's, it just, lots of things happened as a result of just like a couple of calls and going, here's a problem we're trying to, solve here. And we've got this pain point, and what do you have that solves this for me? Or who do you know that can get this connected? And then I think I called Lisa Bajornis, right? And then she's connecting him to Vote. And then, then Render sees both Seamly and Feed Coyote, because we have both of those, and they get in the Render competition. And so, there's all the exposure is what they needed. They had product. They had a working product, and they're like, okay, and for Stevens, it's net effects. So it was like, I mean, Stevens did other really brilliant things. Stevens knows how to reach out. He knows how to really communicate with people, but they needed that exposure. And so that's what we could provide as hubs, right? And so all of our hubs, we have amazing working relationships, and I'd call any of them at any time of day because they're that great. They're not territorial. It's not about that. We all know we want all the companies to win that we can get to win. So we're super free sharing. Nobody's kind of worried about somebody else taking credit for, I don't know what we would worry about, but that doesn't happen. So it's really wonderful. It's really unique. It's probably though why we do so well, right? It's why our companies get connected. I can call Keyhorse at any time. I was on the phone with Zishan today, Zishan Body with Keyhorse. I mean, we know everybody, and we have that ability to say, help me, help me with this. And they will think about it, and they will. And I mean, there's something really highly valuable in that you just can't necessarily find, in a lot of places, and especially a really, really big city. You're going to start working your way in, but how long is it going to take you to get to the person? And here, I think it's just a lot faster. And everybody has amazing networks. Call Dave Knox at Blue North, and he knows everybody. Dave knows everybody. So
100%.
I'll call him. All of them are on my I need you list. Yeah.
No, and that's exactly how it should be. Just back to what I was saying earlier of if you think of Kentucky as a whole as its own startup ecosystem, startup community, rather than like any one city or one region, I think that's the winning strategy for Kentucky is if we look at all of these different cities and all these different hubs and just say, we're on the same team here. Like we are on the Kentucky startup community. It's not the Lexington startup community or the Louisville startup community. And the more people we talk to, whether it's ecosystem supporters, actual entrepreneurs, investors, everyone has that mentality here. And it's a strength that I feel like everyone really leans into. And, kudos to Kentucky Innovation. Their hub network seems to be working as intended. Everyone's working together and wanting to be collaborative and share resources with one another and share networks. And, I think that's really what it takes to kind of, rising tide lifts all boats sort of mentality. So it's cool to we haven't gotten to interact as much with Western Kentucky's ecosystem, but it's cool that it works the same down there as it does in any of the other hubs. But as we
100%.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing 100%. I think that's it. I agree with you. We tend to get cut off. We're in a different time zone. I don't know if y'all know this. We don't even share the same time zone with the rest of the state, which somebody needs to fix. I don't know who, but somebody needs to fix that one. And so it is really challenging, but that's the other thing is, we have a team. I feel like we are a team, and they don't let that stop us, so it has been great. It takes maybe a little bit longer for me to get to meetings, but it's fun to get away too. So
absolutely. Well, as we kind of wrap things up here, we always like ending things looking towards the future. So as we think about Western Kentucky's startup community and Paducah in particular, what does progress look like for your all's ecosystem over the next 5 years?
I think within our region, I think it would be, and we're starting this, and it's very exciting, but really working more regionally instead of 22 separate counties as one region. And that has been really wonderful to do. We have a leadership. It just started a leadership group. I was in this second year of a Leadership West Kentucky group. And I think, while the regional chamber is doing that, it's these relational pieces that make things move faster. It creates more efficiencies. It creates stronger ties of trust and ease of communication. So I would like to kind of capitalize on that by working with those different economic development directors and going, okay, where's a pain point? Where could a small company fit in? How can I support you? We want to do more regional storytelling as well. So we, as our organization, we're looking at grants that help us, hire creative teams to do things like that. Because I think that's going to make us as just over here a little more cohesive and more digestible for anybody coming into the market and wondering, okay, where do I go? How do I understand you as a geographic location and a group of people? So that's a big one. And then really for us is to understand how to get into these verticals. So right now we're playing around in the healthcare space. We built the advisory board, maybe there's going to be something in fintech. We'll build an advisory board around that and have these really strong networks that are built into our workflow that help people like get connected and get moving into what they need to do. So those are the big goals. They're kind of relational. Really, maybe I should be looking at financial and different things like that. But we really think the power is in the people, and so we're gonna focus on that right now.
I love it. Well, before we let you go, if any entrepreneurs are listening that want to get in touch and get involved with Sprocket, where can they go? How can they get in contact?
They should go to sprocketwky.com, and that will take us to them to our website. It is going to be new and revised here in this January. We're going to launch the Mentor Network, the job board, a whole slew of courses, and some other things in there. But that's where they'll go. And that's where they can get connected with us right on that website. It's super easy. It's the best way to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. We're excited to get this one out to our audience and looking forward to keeping up with the progress in Paducah and Western Kentucky.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.